Now, I love to listen to true crime videos, campfire stories, and podcasts about the strange, spooky, and sinister. Probably more than most, and definitely more than I should. But sometimes your noggin needs a break from all that. So, I decided to tell my own non-scary stories and share them here with all of you. Consider this your safe space to relax, listen, learn, and maybe even drift off to sleep. So settle in, wind down, and cuddle up. And welcome to Non-Crime Storytime. Welcome or welcome back. Come on in, get comfy. You can close your eyes if you want. And let me tell you a story. This one's called Hobbyhorsing. When wind breaks her braid into blonde wisps that fold wet inside the curl of her smile. When the clomp of her shoes over overhead floors betrays her awake before dawn. When winter puffs clouds from her nostrils running wet, chapped pink, and wiped clean with a dirty sleeve. That's when I remember. When she sees neither forest, nor trees, nor wires, nor wolves, only sky and sky and sky above. When her stumbling heart befuddles her feet from run to skip to gallop and back again. When the saddle jostles loose and dangles from a carelessly forgotten buckle, clinking almost as she trots into rest, breathless and ecstatic. That's when I remember. When she whines of too tight shoes and doesn't wear her hair in braids anymore. When she screams across the meadow how the bridle and the reins are too tight. When her eyes run red with rage untamed, bucking men wielding a whip or a brush or a handful of sugar cubes. That's when I remember. When she stops her steps and drops my hand just to blow the seedlings from a dandelion. When she gallops and giggles in frantic circles to the whispers in her heart and head. When her body lays calm and heavy on mine, resting in dreams of some open pasture. That's when I remember. I remember I love her, not as mine, but as her own. I remember she is wild, and the world is a creaking tower of fences. I remember girls are horses, and sometimes horses get broken. After all, I remember, I was once a horse too. And now, the rest of the story. Horses have long been a subject of man's fascination, work, and companionship. In the Stone Age, early man scrawled giant herds across dim cave walls nearly 12,000 years before anyone took to horseback for the first time. And for the last 5,000 years, humans have relied on horses for far more than just artistic inspiration. Horses have provided humankind with the stepping stones to some of its greatest accomplishments of technological and societal advances. Nowadays, we've mostly forgotten how indebted we are to horses for our species' progress, as words like horsepower have practically lost their original grandeur to the tractor, automobile, and locomotive. But humans' fascination and endearment with horses remains relatively unchanged, even and especially for those of us without a horse of our own. Peek into a baby's nursery and you're just as likely to find a rocking horse today as you would have a century ago. Rented horse-drawn carriages carry brides and hopeful suitors dreaming of their picture-perfect romantic moment. And the field of equine-assisted psychotherapy continues to improve the lives of children and adults with needs spanning from grief counseling to treatment of trauma and stress disorders. From the Kentucky Derby to the Wild West, from silver and Seabiscuit to Secretariat, Spirit, and beyond, American culture has always celebrated, even idolized horses, especially when it comes to preteen and adolescent girls. sometimes not so lovingly referred to as horse girls. But nowhere in the world do young girls love horses quite like they do in Finland. While all of European history is full of stories of godlike war horses, brave medieval steeds, and trusty old farm mares, Finland's national lore, even before its 1907 independence, has always included horses, including its own national breed, capable of everything from agriculture and forestry to sport, the Finn horse. But when it comes to popularity in Finland, the majestic Finn horse takes second place, because Finland's most popular horse, by far, is the hobby horse. While there's no official record of the hobby horse's first historical appearance, the earliest etchings of children playing on stick horses date back to 16th century Europe. But nearly every continent and historical culture has some sort of manual horse analog, mostly used for play or in cultural celebrations. But in Finland, the stick horse has recently developed a new purpose: competitive hobby horsing. Hobby horsing emerged as a trend in Finland in the early 2000s when the practice of crafting, selling, and group riding homemade stick horses began to make its way around the country and the internet. This newfound trend gave enthusiasts, mostly adolescent girls, an opportunity to be creatively and physically expressive within a like-minded, supportive community. When asked what drew her to the admittedly strange activity, one hobby horser said, "We value the time we spend together in the fresh air and with friends, as well as the promotion of creativity, gymnastics, dedication, responsibility, and love for animals." But in the last 2 decades, hobby horsing has become more than just a playtime and felt crafting trend. Tens of thousands of hobby horse enthusiasts have dedicated their time, money, athleticism, and creativity into the hobby to officially make it a nationally organized competitive sport. While many competitors still enjoy a simple trot through the woods with friends, competitive hobby horsers have established a deceptively difficult and highly physically demanding standard of performance based on traditional equestrian sports to be practiced and performed in a competitive setting on their own 2 feet, with, of course, their trusted hobby horse between their legs. Hobby horsing competitions have multiple events, including high jump, obstacle course speed, and dressage, each with distinct sets of complex rules and scrupulous judging criteria. Smaller, regional competitions are organized by volunteers throughout Finland nearly year-round, giving athletes ample time to practice before the annual Finnish National Championships, held since 2012. Now popular across Europe and into Australia and the US, the sport's intentional yet effortless policy of inclusivity has been one of its major keys to success and growth. But possibly more important is the organization's acute self-awareness and nearly unending positivity, because it will certainly come as no shock to hear that not everyone gets hobby horsing. But those who do seem to have found a calling that draws them closer to nature, a supportive community, and their own self-confidence. The Guardian describes, "Hobby horsing is not some cutesy affectation. Rather, it is a physically uninhibited, imaginatively rousing activity, qualities of play to be encouraged, particularly for young women and girls. It is a unique activity that encourages and enables the holy trinity of personal well-being: physical, spiritual, and creative fulfillment. And hobby horsing, at its core, is deeply creative. Take for starters the hobby horse itself. The vast majority of competitive hobby horses are made at home from everyday supplies like broom handles, craft store felt, and polyester batting, and may sport elaborate hairstyles, expressive faces, and unique names. Some of the sport's handcrafted horses are exchanged and sold by creators at events and through social media, with some fetching up to €200 at auction. while that may seem steep at first, consider the traditional competitive equestrian rider may need nearly $30,000 per year to acquire and then maintain the health of their living, breathing horse. In fact, in comparison to traditional equestrian sports, hobby horsing has many additional positive differences. While many children are prohibited from riding horses due to location, family income, fears, allergies, or safety concerns, nearly all able-bodied children can take to hobby horsing as quickly as they like, with no real concerns for safety or even technical skill. Every hobby horser starts at the same place, a simple gallop through the grass. Where you go from there is up to you. Even the Equestrian Federation of Finland has publicly praised hobby horsing, saying, "We think it's simply wonderful that hobby horsing has become a phenomenon and so popular. It gives a chance to those children and teens who don't own horses to interact with them outside of stables and riding schools." And hobby horsing doesn't actually neglect the horse-centric parts of equestrian sportsmanship. It encourages them. Hobby horse riders are often very sentimentally attached to their horses, and not only during and for shows. Many riders treat their hobby horses as they would a real horse, ensuring they are carefully named, lovingly decorated, manes brushed, and in some cases, even imaginatively fed, watered, and put to sleep in dedicated, makeshift stable boxes in the evening. Make no mistake, the riders don't believe the horses are real, as internet critics often incorrectly assume, but hobby horsers do see the value in caring for their horses in the same way a cyclist, surfer, or musician might take care of their hobby's main tools. And while hobby horsing's heart will always lie within riding for the fun of it, the competitive side of hobby horsing has an indomitable heart of its own. From small groups of neighborhood friends meeting to jump over broom handles in the backyard, competitive hobby horsing has now grown into a multinational, standards-driven sport that demands a great deal from its competitors. The start of hobby horsing's athletic angle lies in its demand for balance, speed, and finesse. In all events and at all times, the aim of a hobby horse rider is to have the upper body mimic the posture and demeanor of a traditional equestrian rider, while the legs emulate the energy and precision of a horse. Here, hobby horsing isn't just running and playing anymore. Elements like step tempo and stride rhythm must be considered and mastered to move in classic equestrian formats like the walk, trot, and canter, which can only be done with keen senses of balance and focus. And it is only after these basic principles are mastered that the steps can be expanded upon for judged, choreographed dressage routines and high-speed obstacle jumping, with some bars reaching nearly 5 feet, chest height or higher on most competitors. But one obstacle hobby horsers have a harder time getting over is public perception. In fact, even the Finnish Hobby Horse Association acknowledges this, introducing itself online with the statement, "Understandably, many of those who have just heard about our hobby are more or less confused." And as a hobby/sport coming into popularity in the age of the internet and social media, hobby horsers must carefully wield a heavy, double-edged sword. Social media platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube have provided the hobby horsing population a way to communicate, share tips and tricks, and create a supportive community. Nellie Nairbass, an 18-year-old hobby horser and content creator in Germany, discovered hobby horsing on YouTube when she was 12, remembering, "I thought it was a little weird at first, but after a while I just tried it out and I immediately enjoyed it. I was able to convince my parents to buy me my first hobby horse. Then I started my own YouTube channel and posted my training there." Nairbass certainly seems to be an effective ambassador to the hobby horsing world, boasting a total of more than 80,000 followers across her social media accounts as one of the many influencers to grow, evangelize, and support the sport online. But with such powerful support comes the equal and opposite force: bullying. While hobby horsing can certainly be visually perplexing at first, Its mixture of movements, running, jumping, balance, and choreography, aren't much different from dance, gymnastics, or traditional track and field events. And considering adolescent girls are often excluded from or increasingly disinterested in sports, particularly as they reach puberty, one would think their excitement, creativity, and community surrounding an athletic endeavor would be encouraged, especially by those without a horse in the race, so to speak. But as these young hobby horsers trot, run, gallop, and craft to their heart's content, the internet has taken to the task of tearing them down. Many hobby horsers recall being ridiculed as soon as they were deemed by others to be quote-unquote too old for the hobby. Whether the creative and crafting part felt wasteful or delusional to others, or the imagination-driven portion felt childish and naive, most riders, now in adolescence and beyond, are being increasingly ridiculed online and even in person. Some as young as 8 or 9 have spoken of bullies, ranging from playground taunting to being pelted with rocks while riding their hobby horses along their neighborhood roads and trails. Some riders are bullied by their peers, some by strangers, and even some by their own families. Sadly, these critics too easily ignore the personal fulfillment benefits of the sport and reach directly for the low-hanging fruit, reminding hobby horsers their horses aren't real, something they are all keenly aware of, insisting they're not athletes, despite some having as high as a 1.5-meter vertical leap while holding a hobby horse between their legs, and ridiculing their uninhibited willingness to be joyful, vulnerable, and creative, 3 traits scientifically proven to contribute directly to mental health and well-being. It is this sad fact that has made hobby horsing's immense online and in-person communities such a joyful, inclusive, creative, and never too serious place to be for these girls, and a few boys, because most other places are not. In competition, all are welcome. Age, race, gender, language, nationality, or experience level aside. Competitors can choose from several disciplines, dependent on a competition's region, rules, and judges. The most common events in competition are show jumping, speed jumping obstacles, dressage, and puissance, high jumping. If your strengths are balance, poise, and choreography, try dressage. If you've got great stamina and a good vertical leap, your best event may be show jumping or puissance. Dressage, living horse or not, is, at its core, a display of a balance of power and relaxation. Power must be used to complete the movements, but those movements must simultaneously seem entirely effortless. This is what makes dressage's dual judging from afar and up front so demanding, and hobby horsing's judging includes both. Traditional dressage with a horse requires that riders communicate with their horse through subtle changes in weight distribution, leg pressure, saddle posture, and rein movement. In hobby horsing, the competitor plays both roles at once. Dressage can be performed in one of 2 formats: Cur, which is more charismatically choreographed and set to music, and Grand Prix, the more traditional, silent format. In Grand Prix, there are 38 set movements and 3 paces: walk, trot, and canter. Inside the trot, there is the piaffe, trotting in place, and the passage, which is the elevated, high knees trot, both of which must be done at a consistent pace, foot height, and without visible strain to the body or face. There are also 2 kinds of trot: extended and collected. Collected is when the legs still bend to gain step height, whereas extended pulls the legs outward for a long, kicking stride. Inside the canter, there are more movements like the canter pirouette, regarded as the most difficult move for a horse to complete. Here, the horse and rider must turn as tight a complete circle as possible in less than 8 strides, while, of course, maintaining the already established canter rhythm. This turn must be completed on both sides for the pirouette to be considered and judged as complete. From there, moves called flying changes show the subtle shifting of weight between leading and following legs, wherein rhythms are changed every 2 strides 9 times, or 15 quick changes in a row, giving a springing appearance. Remember, for hobby horsers, this must be done with consistent rhythm, step height, and no visible strain to balance, breathing, or facial expression, and without ever dropping the horse or its reins. In show jumping and puissance, competitors perform in groups or heats, and during each round, the standard for the next highest jump or fastest time is set. Heats are whittled down until the highest jump or fastest time is reached. The current hobbyhorsing puissance world record is held by Marie Karkinen of Finland, set at the 2019 Hobby Horse World Championships at an impressive 140 centimeters, or 4 feet 7 inches. But in the years since, multiple riders have taken to Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube to show their training taking them to even greater heights, with one Czech rider clearing 143 centimeters, or 4 feet 8 inches. When videos of hobby horsing go viral online, and they often do, viewers and commenters are never at a loss for words. In one case, a hobby horse rider shared a TikTok of herself struggling to catch her breath after competing in the Slovakian championships. She intended for the clip to demonstrate that while the pastime, quote-unquote, looks easy, it requires significant effort, focus, and skill. But some critics immediately accused her of over-dramatizing the difficulty of the sport, while many objected to even categorizing the activity as such. Words like cringe, embarrassing, and even mental illness are often thrown around within comment sections of hobby horsing videos, with no regard for the effort, skill, or feelings of the rider. And sadly, it's not just the rider's school day peers and online critics, but mainstream equestrian athletes have also had something to say about hobby horsing. Particularly how this hobby is inherently disrespectful to the actual art of equestrian sports. Professional equestrian May Naburka states, "Hobby horsing felt so mocking to me. A person who has dedicated 12 years of their life to a sport that has caused hundreds of fatalities, hundreds of thousands of injuries a year." She continues, "I don't mind the concept of hobby horsing in general. These people can do whatever weird they want with their lives, and it's none of my business. But when that weird starts getting compared to my very real sport, it's annoying." She adds, "Seriously, hobby horsers just need to join track or do hurdles or something." In response, Natalia Mikkonen, a hobby horsing champion and online influencer, empathizes. As a competitor in both hobby horsing and, most likely to Naburka's surprise, traditional equestrian competition as well, Mikkonen offers, "Hobby horsing is considered crazy. Thus, we are prone to harassment and misunderstanding from others." Mikkonen adds, "That's the hardest thing about this hobby. People don't understand us. But we have just learned to be ourselves." And considering Natalia's hobby horse jumping height, May's advice to change sports might leave Natalia a little underwhelmed. German hobby horser Nelly Nairbass has similar thoughts, saying, 80% of the hobby horsers I know ride real horses too," echoing that traditional equestrian knowledge carries over to the training and performances with inanimate horses. "We often look at real horses in order to copy the movements a bit," Nairbass says. "I sometimes study equestrian competitions to learn, but hobby horsing demands a synthesis of gymnastic movement as both rider and animal. It's a completely different requirement on the body," she says. "It's much more about stamina." 2017's documentary Hobby Horse Revolution by the Finnish Oscar-nominated director Selma Vilhunen brought greater exposure, understanding, and popularity to the sport. Over the span of a year, she followed young hobby horse enthusiasts and their preparations for competitions, capturing their unique personalities and personal struggles along the way. The film documents the abundant joy the hobby brings to riders and the unfortunate obstacles many of them face, most of which boil down to a lack of support from their families or peers and a constant onslaught of criticism online and at school. The documentary's final sequences show some of hobby horsing's most vibrant personalities defiantly embracing their joy and identity as riders, influencers, and courageous young women. Vilhunen says of hobby horsing's growing global appeal, "I think society starts to shape girls into a certain kind of quietness once they reach puberty," she told the New York Times. In hobby horsing, girls are allowed to be strong and wild. After the documentary's success, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland and the Finland Promotional Board partnered with some of Finland's top fashion designers to create an exclusive streetwear collection called Brave Enough to Ride, which featured hobby horsing designs and models alike. Since the documentary's release, hobby horsing has evolved into a popular, organized activity with competitions taking place in various countries outside of Finland, such as Sweden, Germany, Denmark, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, and the United Kingdom. And as of 2024, the USA and Australia have their own national championships. And while even new continents' most impassioned riders gain and maintain excitement and joy for the sport, it's still difficult for some onlookers to see the appeal. Freedom to create and imagination are key aspects into why people start hobby horsing, says Elisa Arniamaki, a hobby horse veteran and influencer. Leather-jacketed and red-haired, Arniamaki was already a celebrity in the hobby horsing world, known for her hand-sewn horses and impressive riding videos, even before being featured in Hobby Horse Revolution. But as a preteen, she was hesitant to let her classmates know about it. When she was 12, some friends happened to spot her practicing in the woods near her school and teased her for playing a child's game. It didn't fit with their idea of a 12-year-old girl, she says. Hobby horsing has a strong therapeutic side to it, she continues, adding that it helped her deal with difficult personal issues, such as her parents' divorce and bullying at school. "I've gone through lots of trouble, and I'm still struggling with some issues. It has helped me a great deal that I can occasionally just go galloping into the woods with my friends. It somehow balances my mind." Arniamaki is still a rider, coach, and online influencer. Recently, she has been invited to give demonstrations in Sweden, Russia, and the Netherlands, all places where the hobby is gaining traction. Ada Filpa, now 23 and a PR manager for the Finnish Hobby Horse Federation, has won many Finnish hobby horsing competitions, some at as young as 15. Also featured in the documentary Hobby Horse Revolution, Filpa has gone on to spread hobby horsing's message and image to other countries via high-profile media outlets like America's Got Talent, News Nation, and Good Mythical Morning. Ada takes her foreign appearances, doubters, and improv-based interactions and tutorials in great stride, speaking non-native English with presenters and commentators looking to make their viewers laugh. Her skill for riding blends with her grace and personality, and she appears eager to impress, but confident regardless. To online trolls and her students, Filpa offers, "Just a quick note to all of you. If someone gives you hate or says stupid and nasty things to you, you do not need to give them the same hate or say the same stupid things back. Because who wants to act like people who hate one another?" And while these women have found fame and a higher calling from hobby horsing, for some others, hobby horsing is an escape. "Life has its ups and downs," said one writer, Miriam Njai, 14. "This is not the easiest time in my life, but I gotta just jump over it." Elsa Salo describes in the documentary being bullied at school and finding peace through art and traditional equestrian therapy. I started riding real horses when I was 6 years old, and I absolutely loved horses, she says. I rode horses for 10 years, and I had this really dear horse to me. She was called Fiona. She passed away a few years ago, and since then I haven't gone back to actual stables. But my hobby horses have still been in my life, and I love them. Trivoli is my favorite hobby horse because he reminds me of Fiona. Now an adult, Elsa's love for horses inspired her to pursue visual art, which she now does full-time as an art director and set designer in the film and advertising industries. She also recently starred in a feature film called Wolf as, who else, a character called Horse. In the documentary, Elsa's relationships with other riders become integral to her growth as a learning rider, faithful friend, and deeply shy young woman, whose joy while riding is unmistakable, particularly juxtaposed against her anxieties about life outside of her hobbies. My favorite thing about hobby horsing is the community, she says. The community is so tolerating, and we accept everyone the way they are. A decade later, hobby horse riders are still known to be very supportive of one another, even in tournament competition. The sport itself is friendly, safe, and fun for riders and spectators alike. Moreover, hobby horsers spend a great deal of time training for these events with friends and, along the way, develop tight-knit communities that can span countries or even continents. And this combination of physical exercise, creative stimulation, and community involvement is a major key to happiness and personal fulfillment for anyone at any age, but is particularly important to adolescents, whose mental health as a demographic is continually on the decline. Hobby horse crafter and coach Sonja Kallioinen says, hobby horse riding can be an impression of feelings, like a dance, an intense performance of sport, or just a relaxing way to go into the woods, jog, exercise, and get some fresh air. Some compete for ribbons and cups, while others only jog on trails with their horse and call themselves Sunday riders. And while competitions command headlines and online engagement, hobby horsing's heart will always belong to the simple joy of just riding your horse. Hobby horsing creates joy, coaxes creativity, and fosters confidence. Its contagious positivity is what keeps it resilient to such constant criticism. And even after 2 decades, it remains flexible enough to stay fun, but rigid enough to safely support a vulnerable community of impressionable and sometimes overlooked followers. And for anyone willing to pick up the reins and hold on tight, hobby horsing takes riders on a soul-soothing journey. Through a long trot in the woods, over obstacles to an impressive blue ribbon, or just to the comfort of a faithful new friend, even if he's only made of felt.